So, my name is David Wood. I don't really have an intro slide, so you have my lovely desktop wallpaper. I'll be talking today on the WordPress theme customizer. I'll go ahead and give everybody a warning. If you are not comfortable with looking at PHP code, you might be a little lost because most of this involves PHP code, actually digging into the code and seeing how everything works. The reasons, there's lots of options frameworks out there. There's things like Option Tree, Advanced Custom Fields, which does a little more than just options. They all usually will add a admin page that has settings. But the problem with some of those is you have, if you have a theme and you have 3 or 4 different colors that people can pick and you want them to be able to see it live, some of those frameworks don't actually allow them to see the changes live. So if I just pull this up, so right here we have the theme customizer, and so you just open that up, and if the theme supports it, it's there. And by default, WordPress has some stuff, so you can say WordCamp Orlando, and you can see it just updated live. It hasn't saved it until I hit save and publish, and I can say cool site, hit save and publish, I can close out of it, jump back. It's there, it's live. I've changed a couple settings that you usually have to go into the settings page. And so there's a lot of benefit to using it. It's not for everything. If you're building a theme to sell and for some reason you decide you have to have 200 theme options so that absolutely everything can be changed, it's going to be a little unwieldy to have them all in here. But you might pick, these 5 colors and changing the layout. That might be some things that you really want in here. So WordPress has a few things, like you can change the background color, you can change a header image. Some of these come down to if the theme actually supports it. If the theme doesn't support it, it typically won't show up there. But if the theme says they support it, it will show up unless they've done something to hide it. You have quick and easy access to the widgets. There's no widget areas in this theme at this time, so it's not showing up anything there. And you can also change and say, I want front page to be a static page, and I want it to be, I didn't create my home page, but I want the home page to be a sample page. I've actually got a custom theme that's the framework that I usually start with when I build a new site. And so it's got some stuff, so not everything works the way a normal WordPress theme would right out of the box if you had like the default 2010, 2011, 2012, any of those. But that's basically what it does right out of the box. What we'll be looking at is how to actually add your own options to it, and the different things you can do with those. Real quick, can everybody in the back hear me okay? Okay. So, yeah. That better? Okay, I have to do that for every file, so if it is too small, just let me know. So, here on line 7, there's the after setup theme action hook that we're tying into. So when that runs, it will execute this function, and this is where you typically would add theme support. So if, for example, I just comment out this line, and we no longer say that we support a custom background, and I jump back over here, refresh. Okay, I think it's actually being registered somewhere else. It's what happens when you try and take a theme that already has stuff built to make it easy, and then demo with it. You run into issues where stuff doesn't work the way you think it does. Let's change that back. So for this, I've got a file here that I just am including into the functions.php that has a few different examples. So if we start, we've got this global options file. The customize register action is what you would want to tie into to register your own options for the theme customizer. And you just pass it a function you want it to call. That function gets one argument, a WP Customize Manager object. Most examples online will name it WP Customize, so I've done that just to keep it consistent and easy to follow. So in this function, you can see I'm using the WP Customize to add a section, add a setting, and add a control. So like the site title and tagline would be considered a section. And then inside that we have the site title, which the actual visible field would be considered the control. And where that data is actually stored would be considered the setting. So the sections hold controls. The controls tie a setting into something you can actually see and interact with. And the setting just says where the data is stored and what the default value should be if you don't set something. So to add a section, it's pretty simple. You give it a unique ID for that section. In this case, I've prefixed all of my functions and everything with WCO, stand for WordCamp Orlando. Prefixing everything is always good, because that way if I make a theme and you make a plugin and I name something cool option and you name something cool option, if I prefix it and you prefix it with different things, we'll never have an issue. If we have named the same thing, we're both going to get reports of stuff breaking, and I don't want to deal with that. So, so you give it a unique ID, and then there's an array of arguments you can pass to it. These can be the title of the section, a description of the section. The priority determines the order in which they appear. So if you get a priority of 1, and it's the only thing that has a priority of 1, it will show up above everything that has, I think the default is either like a 20 or a 30 is what most of WordPress's defaults to. So if it's higher number, or not higher, if it's a lower number than 20, it will show up before all of WordPress's defaults. If multiple things have the same priority, it sometimes seems kind of random as how it orders it. I think it may have to do with the order that they're actually registered in the code. I haven't actually looked into that much, but that's where that stands. The capability, you can actually specify if you want a section to be available to anybody that can create a new post. So that would be anyone contributor level and above. I don't know why you would give a contributor access to a site option, but it works with any of the WordPress roles and capabilities. But you can change that, and they'll have access to it. The default is edit theme options, which, Micah, do you know off the top of your head, or anybody, what edit theme options, which user role that's on?
It's probably assigned with.
I think it's only admin.
Probably just admin. I mean, it could be assigned to more.
Okay, I wouldn't think it's anything lower than editor, but if you're conscious of keeping everything secure and make sure people don't mess with things they're not supposed to, that's where you'd start with that. And then there's also this theme supports line, which, jumping back to the functions file, any of the strings you can use in the add theme support function can be used there. And let's see. Yeah, so theme supports post thumbnails. So if I come back over here and I hit refresh, we should now have our global options section. But if I come back to functions, and to make sure this works, I'm going to remove theme support. So I'm going to remove post thumbnail support to make sure we do not support post thumbnails in this theme. And so I come back over here and refresh, and global options should disappear because we no longer support post thumbnails as we had defined over here. Then it just disappears. So that's a great way if you have some options that only need to apply if a theme supports post thumbnails, which most people would know as featured image. Then you can control that as well. The default for that is actually just an empty string. So it doesn't rely on any specific theme support for something to show up by default. So only if you define that will it actually have any effect. And then to add a setting, you give the setting an ID. This identifies the setting, and that's what you use when you need to retrieve the value for display on the front end. And it can take a handful of options. On all of these, there's more options than what I'm listing, but I'm listing the options that are most commonly used. So there's a lot of these functions have great documentation on the WordPress Codex in terms of all the options you have available. So if you really want to know all the other options that are out there, you can go look there and see. But I'm just listing the most commonly used ones and the ones that have a useful case, like the capability and theme supports. So the default value would be what's set if the user hasn't entered anything. The type is the storage type used. The two options that WordPress gives you that work out of the box are option and theme mod, with theme mod being the default. If you use option, it actually stores it in the options table, and you would retrieve the value with get option. If you use theme mod, there's actually a function. Let me just pull up. There's a get theme mod function, and you can see here I've got that setting name in there, and this function will also take a default value it should have. So if I put in chicken, hit save, I haven't actually, refresh. There we go. So you see here, it's got a value filled in already, and it's already putting it out there. But if I go to theme customizer dev, it just says chicken because that's what I've put in that file that actually outputs that as the default it should use if it's not set. So if I come back over here and let's just say I change this default from being Disney World to Legoland. Hit save. That now says Legoland in the preview, and on the live site you can see we actually have the address there. So that's a little bit about how the different setting types work. As far as adding the control, which is what you actually see when you're in the customizer, you give it a control ID, which typically that is the same thing as your setting ID. It can be different, but if it's the same thing, then you don't have to set as many options in the arguments array. In the arguments array for a control can take a label, which is the user displayed label. It says what the field is. You can give it an optional description, which that is something they added in WordPress 4.0. So before 4.0 you could not actually set a description. You can give the field the control of priority, so you can organize your settings to a certain order. The section, you give it the ID of the section you want it to appear in. And WordPress, all of its defaults that it registers, you can also use the ID of any of those. There's a list of those available on the, I believe on the add control page on the WP codecs. If you're using a radio, the radio inputs, or a drop-down select box with custom values, you have to pass in an array into choices, and this would just be minus the comments. It would just be your value and your label. So the value is what would be stored in the database, and the label is what the user would see. WordPress already does this. They have a drop-down pages down here for type. You can specify drop-down pages as the type, and it will automatically create a drop-down list of all the pages in WordPress. They do not have a built-in way to do that with posts, and I actually recommend against doing that with WordPress posts, because if you have a blog that has, it's been going for 5 years, you've got 10,000 blog posts, you will probably crash the page if you try to generate that list. So just word of warning, don't make a drop-down list that's giant. And drop-down pages. So what they do with the drop-down pages is they basically do the same thing you would do if you passed to choices, if you passed in an array where the value is the ID of the page and the label is the name of the page. That's the same thing WordPress does to make a drop-down of pages. It just does it all for you, so you don't have to worry about it. The other types of input, I'm going to come back to input attributes in just a second. By default, following this method, you have text, checkbox, radio, select, drop-down pages, and they added text area in 4.0. Before 4.0, you actually had to create a class to extend the customizer to have a text area. Now you can just do that right out of the box, which is nice. And also as a 4.0, other input field types that use the actual input tag, such as email, tel, date, and range, all the ones like that are supported automatically. The input attributes argument, you can pass in an array and it will add these as attribute tags on the input element. So you see here I've got a style color dark orange, which if we come back over here, you'll see that text is a dark orange color. And if we just look at that input field, see if I can get this big enough to read. You'll see it's got an inline style tag, and it also has a, let's see, where'd the other one go? Data WCO, some test data value, which was the other option I had back here in this array. So that's the basics on how to add a panel and to add settings to it. And then, as I showed in the masthead file, the get theme mod function there is what you would call to actually output it. I do have this in escape HTML function. I recommend if you're outputting anything on the front end that a user has input in the back end, you look up all of the escape functions. There's some good descriptions of when to use them on the WordPress codecs. They're very useful. They keep things from happening, like if a user decides they want to open 5 div tags, it doesn't break your entire page's layout. It's a quick example of the importance. If I just take that out and jump back over here, and at the end of this I open up div tags without that extra security in place, the site does not look like it's supposed to anymore. And you see down in the footer there, it actually is outputting the div tags because the escape HTML function will just turn any HTML it gets into a div tag, into the actual text representation of it. That's not the focus of this talk, but I just wanted to point that out so that if you add these and all of a sudden, you had a text area and user put some fields in it or some HTML, and all of a sudden their site's broken, that might be a good place to look first and see if they didn't close a tag properly. So it's really up to the use case of your field as to whether or not you need to use those escape functions when you're outputting it. But I definitely recommend some form of checking to make sure that they are actually built correctly. One function I will recommend if you're expecting HTML input is the force balance tags function. If you pass data in through that, it makes sure that if they open 5 div tags, it closes 5 div tags. And so that way you can accept HTML without it doing that to your site. And you're hopefully better designed than what I threw together. So the other thing you can do is you can, this is all pretty much the same, just redefining a new section. I'm adding a setting. In this case, all I need to do is add the name because I just want it to use all the defaults. And then I'm adding a control. And this one you'll notice is different because we're instantiating a new class. WordPress has a few different classes. They've got an image control class, which we're using here. They have an upload control. There's a color picker, and they've got a couple others. And you can also write your own to extend any of these or to extend the WP customized control class. I'm not going to cover how to extend that class today, but here's an example using image control. And so most of the time when you use a class, you'll add the WP customize manager object. You'll give it an ID for the control. Once again, this can be the same as the setting ID. In this case, I actually did not use the same ID as the setting, just to illustrate that you can, in your argument array, use this settings value and set that to the ID of your setting. Tell it what section it's in, give it a description, give it a label. So if I come over here, and we want to see what this upload control looks like. There's no image, but I can come over here, upload a file, and we have a logo now. I did have to write some code in the header to actually switch between outputting the title and description to then output an image. But all I'm doing, I'll just pull the file up. Is I'm getting the logo value, which that particular control will actually just store the URL of the image. So do be aware if you build this in a dev environment and then you launch it, the URL for the image may not be correct. You may have to re-upload it because it's stored your dev environment URL and not the live site URL. So just something to look out for. So I'm storing the value of that, and if we have it, I'm going through and outputting an image wrapped in a link tag so that anybody that clicks on the logo goes back to the home page. But then down here, if we don't have the setting, if the setting is not saved, we're then just outputting the title and the description of the site, like you saw earlier. So there can be a little bit of legwork depending on how complicated you want to get with your options, but it can also be as simple as just echoing out whatever it has, which is what I did up here. I basically just echo out whatever they set for the address. And some cases that's good, some cases that's bad. Then there is another fun thing they added in 4.0 called panels. And these are really nice. Which one was that? That was this file. Panels look the same as sections when you're creating them. You give it an ID, you give it a title, you give it a description, you can give it a priority. And that's really all there is to panels. But then you can add sections to the panels. You can't add a control to a panel, but you can add a section to a panel. So when you're creating a section, you just pass it the ID of the panel. And if we come over here and refresh again, you'll see we now have this homepage options. And we can click here, and then we have featured pages, and we have the cool bar. So under featured pages, I can come in, I can say we have a cool puppy, and we have a cool kitten. And I can save that, and we can look at our cool puppy and our cool kitten. And then we have our cool bar, which is not actually showing up right now. And I'm not sure why. It was there earlier. But here's an example, too, of adding a range slider. Look at the code for that and see it's pretty similar. Let's see, where did I... Okay, here we go. You basically just, for the type, you just say range. And this is an HTML5 field type. And for input attributes, we're saying the minimum value you can have is 1. The maximum value you can have is 100. And it needs to be an even integer, basically, is all that's saying. I could change that to 5, and only multiples of 5 would ever be selectable. So that's a better use of input attributes than changing the color of the text in an input field. But I still think it looks kind of cool to change the color in the input field. And so the other thing I want to talk about was this transport option, which actually goes on the setting. By default, it is refresh, which every time I change a theme option in the customizer, you'll notice that the whole preview page flickers because it's reloading the page. It's just regenerating the entire page. If you set that to post message, you can actually have it, you send a JavaScript message to the preview page, and then you have to custom write JavaScript that will update immediately on the page. So you don't have that whole refresh, but it takes a little more work to get there. And let me just turn this on and see if it decides to show the bar. If it does, great. If not, I will try and figure it out. I am planning on putting all this code. I'm not going to have the entire theme because there's some stuff in there that we've been working on for a client that I'm not allowed to share. But all the actual theme option code and examples of how to output it, I plan on putting up on my website in a zip file. If anybody wants to go ahead and write down the URL, it's davidwood.ninja. So I hope to have that up by the end of the day. And that way, all this code you'll have, you can play with it, see what it does. See. All right, so that's set. Yeah, I don't know why this isn't working for that bar. So unfortunately, I can't show you the fancy JavaScript. Well, I can show you the JavaScript, but I can't show it to you in action. To be able to, I'll explain what the settings did. The settings originally, there would be a bar on the page, and you can change, the slider would go from 1 to 100, and that would just determine the percentage width of the bar. So it can be full width, it can be just a little small bar, anywhere in between. And then there's a color picker would change color in real time because of the JavaScript. Here's an example of what that JavaScript is to update. If you don't know JavaScript, this is going to look a little weird, but all it's saying is that it's getting the, if you updated the cool bar setting, then it's going to find the super cool bar and it's going to set the width to whatever the value was plus a % symbol so that it'll be a % width. And it just adds that inline so that you see it updated immediately on the page. Same thing with the color. It looks to see what color you've gotten and it just updates the background color on that div that I had there. The only other thing you have to add to get that to work is in the functions file. We'll come back to this. This function down here, you have to add to the customize preview init action. You just have to add a function that enqueues your custom JavaScript for the customizer to handle all the live preview stuff. I have never actually done the live preview with JavaScript until today, because most of the sites that I work on, we'll build a site one week, it'll have one set of theme options, and then the next week we're doing another custom design site for a different client, completely different set of theme options. There's no real overlap in theme options. So for me to sit there and write that JavaScript for everything, it's a little tedious. But if you're writing a theme that you intend to sell, then I would actually recommend doing that because it adds that little bit of extra polish and it makes customers feel like they bought a good theme. So I wanted to include that to show how it's done. I still don't know why my demo is not working, but I added the demo for that today. So, but yeah, if you've never used the WP enqueue script function before, I recommend looking that up. It's a great way to enqueue JavaScript, and it's how WordPress recommends adding JavaScript files to your site, because that way people can modify it if they have to very easily, and it makes sure it loads in the correct order. So I also have an example of how to add a setting to an existing WordPress panel in the customizer. So by default, WordPress has this colors option if your theme supports a background color. And they'll give you the background color, and you can go in, you can select it, and I don't think this theme actually supports the background color, so it's not going to work. But what will work is, if I refresh, what I just uncommented was the code to add the masthead background color option, which I can come in here, and I can turn the nice, lovely color matched header up there to red, and it's not working because I forgot to uncomment, let's see, where this file. In my functions.php file, I have this action commented out. If I uncomment that, then is WP head where you're actually supposed to print out styles that you're doing inline like that, Micah?
WP print styles, which is done in WP head, but it's very specific.
Okay, but then how do you make sure? I couldn't get it to do it after the actual theme CSS files.
Yeah, I have to look at it.
So
WP add inline script.
Yeah, that would probably be the best.
that could be what I was trying to find and didn't have time to find it. So probably ignore the WP head bit, but the WP inline script should do what we want. If you do it on WP head, it's going to be at the very last thing in WP head, except for other people that are doing the same thing. So I would dig around more and find a better solution. I just ran out of time preparing this. But all I'm doing here is I'm getting the masthead background color, also getting the default value it should be, and I'm just setting the background color in CSS. So now if I come back over here, I don't even have to reload because it's going to reload the preview. We have a lovely color matched header now. I know this is driving any designers in the room crazy, but it's published. So, and the code to add the color picker is very similar to what we did with the image upload, and that was in this file. It's just using the WP Customized Color Control class, and I didn't really have to do much to it. Down here in section, you'll see I'm adding it to colors, which is simply just the ID that WordPress uses to register that colors panel that it showed up in. So you can add it to panels that WordPress has. You can add it to panels that a theme adds if you're adding one extra little option in a plugin. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with it. I can't list all the possibilities because I'm not going to think of all of them. And with that, I guess have time for questions. davidwood.ninja, and I'll just have a link there on the home page, hopefully by the end of the day. So.
There's a tool that kind of does this called, is it Kirku? I think. If you Google it, it kind of does this. Have you ever worked with that? Just curious.
I have never heard of it, so.
A guy that has this kind of stuff in it.
It's a
So.
cool, like, nice UI that's fully animated, very nice. It has all these extendable things really built in, so you can just pop it in modularly really quick.
Okay.
I didn't know if you dealt with that because this looks the same as.
I mean, this is.
It works with the customizer.
Yeah, I mean, everything I've shown code-wise is 100% working just with WordPress. So,
It extends it.
yeah, so it's basically just a layer you're saying that makes it easier to work with. Yeah, so that may be worth looking at. I know I was talking with Josh earlier. Is he in here? Ah, yeah, there you are. So he was asking too. I'll just go ahead and mention this. For saving a setting, it's not in that file that I have that example. Yeah, right here. He was asking if there's a way he could have it where you can change user-specific settings that are stored as user meta. And the answer to that is yes and no. No, you cannot do it right out of the box, but there is a hook in WordPress. Do you have the name of that?
I actually just figured out how it works. It's customize update underscore whatever you set there.
Yeah, so if I put Chicken Little in there, and you said customize update, right? Customize up, okay, so then if I have an action hook called customize underscore update underscore Chicken Little, then I can actually save that data however I want, wherever I want to. So I'm just throwing,
In the Chicken Little table.
yeah, in the Chicken Little table. I make a table called Chicken Little, and I can store my data there. So I'm just throwing that out there too for anybody that's looking for an adventuresome task of having all user settings be editable from the theme customizer. I'm not sure the full use case of that, but have fun. So.
Yes, any place for this, like in multi-site?
This will work perfectly fine in multi-site. Once again, going back to the capability role there, if a user does not have that capability, they will not be able to see it. As far as changing settings across multiple sites, there's no built-in way to do that. But like I just mentioned, with you can change the type. You could say, you know, whatever your prefix is, site option, and have a function that actually stores that information as a site option, and then the theme on all your multi-site sites could pull in a site option as a setting to modify whatever you would normally do on just one site. So you can control multiple sites from one theme customizer. The downside of that is they'd all have to be the same. But I mean, you could also write ways where if it's on a sub-site, it could store it separately for that site, and if that exists, it uses that. Otherwise, it uses what came from the main site. There's lots of things you could do with that, but that would be where I'd start with that. I think there was another question over here that I skipped over. Did you have one?
It was already answered.
All right.
I have
Yes.
a question for reference back there. Can you spell curfew?
I'm actually about to search that.
Thank you.
All right.
In a second.
Anybody else?
I didn't bring that up to like detract.
Yeah.
I think it's literally this just kind of package. So
It's just a wrap. It's just an easier to use API than what WordPress has.
you can
Yeah.
include it within the theme that you're building, and it does this pretty easily. So.
Yeah. It's not in a state I would actually present right now, but I had actually at one point written. Basically, I can just pass in a multi-dimensional array of all my setting options, and I don't have to write all this code. It just does all that. But I'm still in the process of trying to get that where it supports all the stuff in 4.0.
That's awesome.
So all the sites that I build personally, that's actually what I do because we can get it done fast. So, okay. Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about like some of the use cases you've run into where you needed to add your own custom types of fields?
Yes. So one thing you can do, like I was saying before, like they have the color controls, they have the image upload controls. The thing I don't like about WordPress's built-in image upload controls and all the ways they have to work with images in the theme customizer is you can't actually pick something that already exists in your media library. They don't have the actual media library accessible in the theme customizer. And so on one particular site I was working on, we actually needed to be able to have the whole library accessible from the theme customizer. So I actually had wrote a class to extend the theme customizer to add a new control type that will actually allow you to click a button and it brings up the full WordPress media library. And then it'll just grab the ID of the attachment in the library and it stores that. So then you can get that ID, you can get the attachment, and you can get whatever image size you want. If I can remember, I will try and stick another zip file up with all of this code that has some of those just as examples. And I mean, feel free to take the one for the media library because that's, to me, the most useful one I've written. Outside of the text area, which 4.0 so gladly decided to have in there by default. So, and it works the same way as, I mean, like the color control, all of those, it basically takes the exact same options. It just instead will give you an actual media library. So.
Yeah, time for about one more.
Okay. One last question, anybody? Okay. Well, I guess that's it. So thank you.